Yeah, we're live. It's hot in here. It's getting hot in here. Let's see. I'm gonna move this over just a little bit. Okay. Got my ice water. Got my air conditioning going on. Hopefully you guys are all doing well. Today we're going to talk about LS versus LT. In fact, that's going to be the poll for tonight. LS versus LT. I've done some testing on like an L83, and back when I was with the guys at Brian Tooley Racing, they did some testing on some LT1 stuff and some L86 stuff, and so I'll be able to put some videos up on some testing that is going on back there. But this begs the question: the LT motor obviously makes more power than the LS stuff does. It's an evolutionary step up. So from a factory performance standpoint, I mean, it's hard to argue. If you look at and I posted these videos already, if you take a look at a direct comparison between an L83 and like an LM7 or even an L33 or any of the variants of a 5.3 liter LS based motor, it's not even close. It's not, if typically to give you an idea, when we run an LM7 from the wrecking yard, it's even when it's optimized, it's 350-ish horsepower. And the L83 that we ran was 400 or better. So it's a big change in power, stepping up to not just the direct injection, but variable cam and higher compression and better cylinder heads in case of the L83, because those definitely flow more and can support more power than the 706 heads. The intake manifold is very good. All those things are really good. But here's the thing that is potentially holding this back, and that's that the LT motor, and I think that we went through this with a lot of different, a lot of different newer models. A lot of guys have asked me, well, why I want you to do the Ford 7.3 liter Godzilla motor. That's all great, and I'd like to, except that it's new and it's expensive. And so it's hard for me to find in a wrecking yard. And the LT stuff suffers from the same kind of thing. You can find those now at some of these online places that do, takeout motors and stuff. But I don't ever see any of those in the wrecking yards that I go to. I never go over there and see an L83 or an L86 in the truck. Those would be the ones that you would find. Just like with all the LS stuff, I'm not going to go find an LS1 in a Camaro anymore. I'm not going to go find an LS2, an LS3, an L99 in any of the cool motors that I would want to find. In fact, I very rarely have I ever seen a 6-liter in the wrecking yard, but lots and lots of truck stuff. So when the L80 or when the LT motors do start making their way, people crash them or they break the transmissions or whatever they're going to do, and start finding their way into yards in a more in a larger volume like we have with the LS stuff, that they're going to be the base motor. They're going to be the 5.3. They're going to be the L83 version, which that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not as good as the L86 is, but they are good and they make lots of power, and they make more power than an LS motor. But the problem is, again, even with that, even if that were the case, even if we had an overabundance of LT-based motors in the yard available to us, which we don't yet, a couple of things would happen. One, they would more likely be more expensive. Some of the yards that I go to, everything is the same. It's just a motor. And so they don't have a difference in pricing between a 4-cylinder, a 6-cylinder, an 8-cylinder. The only variations I've seen for some reason, or the one that I go to a lot, is small block or big block Chevys cost more than everything else for some reason. And I'm not sure, maybe they were more popular or something. But big block Fords were one price and big block Chevys were the other. And so my guess is those motors would be more expensive, especially if you're talking about getting, now they've seen fit, probably because guys like me doing lots of videos on junkyard stuff and how cool it is, that now they're nickel and diming you to death. Now they're charging for everything. Oh, the alternator's there, the water pump's there, the power steering's there, whatever thing. And honestly, for the things that I do normally, we would just take that stuff off and throw it away. It would just come with me because when we would buy them, we would normally buy them as complete motors, and all that stuff was included. So we got it all. And then if somebody wanted it, somebody wanted the serpentine system, or I've kept some assemblies, like front dress assemblies from the 4.8 and 5.3 LS motors that I've gotten, just because I wanted to eventually do testing with the accessories and show how much they were worth. Also, sometimes when we do blower stuff, accessories are needed. You know, there are some reasons to just have that stuff laying around, because ultimately I go back and test it. And when I do, I don't want to have to buy new stuff. And by new stuff, I mean new stuff that's used from the wrecking yard again. And there's nothing more frustrating than throwing this stuff away 10 or 15 or 20 times and then have to go buy it after I've already done that. So we keep at least one assembly so that there's something I could use. Like we just used it on the putting the Shelby blower, the GT500 blower, the 2.3 meter on the LS, so we could use the drive assembly and stuff. And that works out good. But the thing is that even if the LT motors came in abundance, let's say, and they were there to, you know, to choose from, there was a whole bunch of them to choose from. And if they weren't more expensive, they're ultimately going to be harder to swap and stuff. And I think more expensive, because an LS, we can change. The nice thing about the LS is that obviously they, you know, everybody puts a cam and springs and boosts in them, and you can make lots and lots of power. Well, you can't go that same route with an LT. And if you did, if you tried to, there are limitations. The motor itself will take that stuff. It will, you know, you could put head studs in it, and guys are obviously running boost in it. You can run the direct injection. You can step up the fuel flow of the direct injection with a number of methods. You can change the injector size. You can change the pump. You can change the lobe on the cam. You can change the inlet pressure. But ultimately, if you want to get up to the area where lots and lots and lots of LS guys are, meaning 1,000+ horsepower stuff, it starts getting really expensive. And it's not that much more expensive to get to that level on an LS than it is just to get to 500 or 600, because you're gonna have to get new injectors anyways. A lot of guys use decap injectors or Deca 80s, which are a fairly inexpensive deal. If you're trying to make 1,500 or something like that, you need, you know, the injectors that ultimately you have to get. You can get snake eater stuff, or other ones, you know, 1,000 cc's, 1,500 cc's, 2,000s, 2,200s. You can get those kinds of injectors. Unfortunately, that sort of availability hasn't graced the LT market. So there aren't like 20 or 30 companies making injectors for the LT. Like we can't just go get the decapped LT injectors, the load buck approach. And I know that there's LT4 stuff and there are some upgrades for them. But the thing is that that's still not a cheap date like it is with an LS. And I think that that's one thing. So we'll go. We've got some people here now. So let's go ahead and we'll put our poll up. Is the LT motor better than the... we won't do it that way. Okay, so will the LT motor, L83, L86, LT1, LT4, EVNTUA, right, eventually replace the LS motor for swapping? And also, I need to apologize for the guys that have watched the video, the latest video. I'm having some sort of glitch that's going on in the editing that's leaving when I put in a numerical value for horsepower and stuff. For some reason, it's like time tagging that to infinite or something. And so I need to figure out what's going on. I need to take a closer look at that and make sure that that doesn't, it's already happened twice. And so I need to make sure that doesn't happen again. This is a brand new version of the video software that I'm using, and it's a little different. And it might be me fat thumbing it. It might be something that I'm not used to, or, you know, could be lots of stuff. I'm taking full blame, but either way, so sorry about that for guys that had to look at that. So will the LT motor eventually replace the LS motor for swapping? So that will be our poll for today. So the thing that I've run the photo that I have up for the thumbnail is an L83 because I have one of those, and I want to very badly run boost on it. And the thing that's holding me back is I'm probably going to ship that motor back to the guys at Brian Tooley Racing and have James do the tuning on it, because they can tune the LT stuff with I think they have a Haltech back there. And so I think that they also have some LT4 injectors and pump and stuff. So we could go up to a fairly decent amount of power. And then they also have their own intake manifold that we could run, augment it with port injection and get more power and stuff. And so I think we could get fairly far with that. So it'd be interesting to run I want to run the L83, the boost, because I haven't done that yet. We've run it with nitrous, and we've tried a couple of things on it, but not nearly as extensive as the testing that I've done, obviously, on the LS. And I think more of that needs to be done. We want to do the different intake manifolds and stuff. I know that when I went back there last time, we were kind of right in the middle of hoping to test the LT2 intake manifold from the C8 Corvette. So they were wanting to try that and see how that compared to the MSD and the L86 and the LT1, the other things that were available. And obviously, the guys at Brian Tooley Racing have a number of different intake manifolds available for that for the LT family now too, I think. And so it would be cool to know all that, like all the different intake manifolds. We want to see how all they do, like I did for the cathedral port stuff and the rec port stuff. And now I think that there's enough there that we need to look at that for the LT stuff. Guys that are regular viewers here are going to know short runner, high RPM, long runner, lower RPM. They're going to understand that and I think be able to follow that. But it's nice to have, specific ideas on what it does. Tunnel ram for the LS. Yeah, high ram is a tunnel ram for the LS. So we've run that. Not only have we run that with fuel injection, but we've also run that with dual quad carburetors, the way that a lot of guys run tunnel ram stuff. So I do want to do the LT testing. I want to do more of it. Let's see where we are on our poll. Let's see when I first posted it. So we got 52 votes here. Everybody make sure you get up and hit the poll. Will the LT motor eventually replace the LS motor for swapping? So right now we're split about 50-50 on that. So it's interesting. So like I said, we do want to run boost on it, and I like to run, if we get to where we have the fuel going to it, obviously tuning the timing and tuning the injector timing, all of that is certainly possible. I think James has a fairly good handle on that. But getting we could run it with other forms of force induction too. We could run it with single turbo, twin turbos, whatever, but also with, centrifugal blowers and roots blowers and those kinds of things. Because once you have the fuel available to you, then it's just a matter of getting the air in, and we can do that multiple ways. Heck, you could make an adapter and put a 671 or an 871 on one of those things and kind of go old school on it. Even with, I really like on the L83 when we were doing the testing out. The one thing that really impressed me especially when we were looking as a comparison between the L83 and the LM7, like the LS based 5.3 and even this L33, if you look at it as a comparison, the torque curve offered by the L83, partly from variable cam timing and obviously compression as well too, and cylinder head and intake manifolds, all of it. But variable cam timing helps that thing have a really, really broad torque curve, which is impressive. So down low, the L83 is quite a bit better than an LM7. Although I've had people complain to me about in the vehicle, and I don't know that this was a matter of programming or that the dyno is not saying the same thing, that the way that they feel, which is why when I test, I don't do it by feel. We actually use numbers. But they were saying that they thought that the L83s were kind of soft down low. Again, I don't know if it's gearing or converter or programming or whatever, but we didn't see that in the testing. We saw that it was making not just a little bit more, but like 40 or 50 more foot-pounds down low than a typical LM7. So that's nice. And that's kind of, if there's a complaint about the 4.8 or the 5.3 LS, is that most guys talk about, and even a 6.0 to some extent, they just want more low-speed power. How do I get more power at, 400 RPM, but 1500 RPM or 2000 or 2500 and 3000. How do I get more torque in that area? And then displacement is a really good way to do it. But variable cam also is another way to do it. Although, and I was asking Brian about that. I was asking Brian Tooley about that because we were talking about the variable cam on the L83 and on the L86 and stuff. And I asked him if he thought that we could get, like, can we configure up a 5.3 with the variable cam from like an LY6 from a Gen 6 motor, I mean a Gen 4 motor. Can we configure it with that? And he said we could. He said we've tried that, and he said actually the LS motor didn't respond nearly as well to the variable cam as the Gen 5 motor did. And I don't know if that's a function of the particular cam that was tested, or it's a function of the higher compression and the direct injection maybe taking better advantage of it. I don't have enough data on that to kind of definitively tell you right now. It would just be speculation. You guys can all speculate as you want on that too. But what I was hoping for is that we could take a 4.8 or a 5.3 and put variable cam in it and then make it, add all the low speed power, which I think would be fairly cool. I still kind of want to revisit that because I haven't done, and the reason I haven't done lots of variable cam timing on a Gen 3 or Gen 4 LS motor is that I don't have a way to, the Holley doesn't let me program that, and I don't do any of the factory ECU stuff. So that might have to be done in a vehicle maybe, unless I could configure up a factory ECU to run on the dyno, which would be kind of cool because I would like to do that to be able to run variable cam time. That would kind of be awesome. So how is our poll doing? 44% yes, that will replace it, and 56% saying no. So we're kind of split here. Interesting. I think that there are issues with it. I think it's a good motor, but it's not without its hurdles. And I think that we saw the same thing. If you look back when the fuel injection replaced carburation, everybody said the same thing. Oh, you won't be able to modify them. We won't be able to do anything and all that. And it's the same thing. I just don't know if the aftermarket will overcome a lot of these hurdles for us on the direct injection primarily with fuel supply on this combination, because all the other things, ported heads are really easy, piston design is easy, we can adjust variable cam, and actually once you get to a certain level of performance cam, there's very little range of adjustability anyway, unless you were to do something fairly aggressively with the piston design to give you the piston to valve clearance that you would need to swing that thing. So after you get, you start putting a performance cam in, you have limiters, and then you just have stops where you're not allowing it to do anything. So again, more testing and cool stuff to try on the Gen 5 motor, which I'd like to do. And really, like anything, more than anything, I just want to run one under boost. So let's see what you guys are doing. Let's see, we got some questions here. Casey, please tell your mother happy birthday. Overbuilt, Richard, and all interested in great YouTube video. Watch this uploaded by my friend Duke. World Bigfoot Radio 134, the missing Patterson video. Direct injection. Noodles, direct injection is not budget friendly for high horsepower E85 applications. And that becomes even more problematic because the E85 would be what we would want. And then you need even bigger injectors for that. So the existing injector combinations for LT motors become even more restrictive, basically, if you're trying to run E85 in it. .6 liter LT8, that's lots of potential there. Trying to scroll back and see if I've got some questions from some people. L83 trucks are big bricks compared to the LS trucks. So are the modern, and typically what happens is as we get newer and newer vehicles, they become heavier and heavier. If the Gen 5 replaces the Gen 3 and 4 for swaps, it's going to be a long time. Okay, so you think that even if it happened, it would happen a long time from now? Is the 95 SS Impala 350 block good for 1,000 horsepower? Sure. I don't think it would run reliably or, you know, for a really long time at 1,000 horsepower, but you probably could make passes at it. We tried an engine with nice headers and thin and equal length Y pipe. Like on a turbo application? Noodles, I agree. I think that that's the thing that's going to eventually make that happen is just time. His point was at some point in time, we're going to run out of LS engines. And just like my discussion when I was talking about the B series stuff, the B series Honda stuff back in the day, I'm like, God, these are only like a few $100s. This can't last forever, and it didn't. And that's what we'll start to see with LS engines. So if you're smart, go buy all of the super cheap LS engines that you can, and find some free storage somewhere for them and hoard them, and then sell them when they're all like $1,000 or $2,000 a piece. My new work truck is a 2021. It says it has a 6.7. Is it 6.7 or 6.6? Richard, have you ever driven an IROC Z, and if so, how fast? I don't think I've ever driven really fast in one of those. I drove one, a new one, before I bought my Mustang, my '88 Mustang, because I was looking at the Camaro and the Mustang because those were natural enemies. And I'm not brand specific. I just wanted the thing that was going to best do what I wanted it to do. And I picked the Mustang mainly because when I drove the Camaro, I really didn't like the thing that I didn't like about that Camaro. I like the way that they look, and I like the way that they handled, and the motor in them, all that stuff was good. I didn't like the dash, more specifically the top of the dash. I didn't like how wide it was. Just put me off. Just one thing that it was enough for me. Like I don't want that. I'm not going to want to live with that for the rest of my life. And I ended up getting the Mustang, but I got it to road race. Looking back, that was a terrible decision because they came out with a 1LE Camaro, and it was much faster and had better brakes and everything than the Mustang was. Yeah, variable cam timing on factory applications is really good. I mean, it makes for a much improved curve over having a fixed camshaft. Michael, does port injection have less of a cooling effect than port injection? Direct injection have less of a cooling effect? Yes, it does have less. Have you ever experienced valve float on LS with roll rockers? Yes, many times. If you take a stock motor, a stock 4.8 or 5.3 with they kind of have the wimpy valve springs because they've got the mildest camshafts of any of the factory stuff, and you put roller rockers in it, the motor will go into valve float. And you take a look at I have a roller rocker test up where we did that, and it did go into valve float. You need to, if you're going to put rockers on it, you definitely have to put springs on it. And I can take a look. In fact, I can look that up for you right now. I can tell you exactly when it went into valve float. That's rec port. We'll go to cathedral port for 4.8 or 5.3. I think it was a 5.3 that we did 4.8 valve float. So let's see. Take a look at the 5.3 rocker test. Cathedral port 5.3. Mild cam test. Man, there's a lot of tests. Accessory test, Victor Jr. Crane cams. So this will give you an example. We also ran rockers on a stock one, but this was on a 5.3 that I ran an LS7 cam on, and then we put LS7 cams. It was less than 6,000 with the rockers on valve float. Happy Sunday to everybody. 6.6 has a 4065 bore and a 382 stroke. A 3.82. I actually don't know what the dimensions are on the 6.6. Are comp roller rockers as good as a Scorpion rocker? For what application are you looking at? I don't usually put roller rockers on LS motors. Casey, I don't have any FE videos up. The aftermarket still provides old school engines, so aftermarket LS should be around for a while. I agree. It's the LS, the industry that has grown up and around to support the LS engine family is huge. But just like the 5-liter Ford, it was also huge. That's stock head for 1,000 horsepower streetcar 33706. You don't need ported heads for 1,000 horsepower on an LS. You just use the head that you have. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Any factory head will easily do 1,000 horsepower. If you have especially if you have a 383. Oh, I see Jeffrey Casey is just to talk about Robert Pond's 482. The video the photo that I had up, the thumbnail that I had up was one of Robert Pond's 482 all aluminum stroker FE motors, and it was me hoping that I could do a video on it. I can't find all the photos and stuff. Why don't you put roller rockers on LS? They're not necessary. The factory is already a roller Fulcrum rocker. It's just a slider on the tip, and you don't really gain much from the roller tip, except in fairly high lift applications where you might not want to wear out like a bronze guide or something. But powder metal guides and factory rockers have gone lots of RPM and lots of power. What benefits or gains for LS motors with full roller rockers? I kind of just talked about that. 4-cam engines are much better, but high tech for most of us. Again, saying that they have more technology might not mean that they provide what you're looking for, especially at the cost that you're looking for and stuff. So that's the thing. I've had this discussion with people before. Oh yeah, the 2J is better because it's overhead cam and it's 4-valve and it's got more technology, and those dumb V8s are just tractor motors. I'm like, yeah, except that they make twice as much as your motor or 3 times as much as your motor NA, and so it doesn't take 50 pounds of boost to make big power with these. So if the goal is for you to make power, or is the goal for you to say that I made power with more technology? Again, it's all about what you want to get done. I am going to run the 8.1 for more testing. I'm asking about roller rockers for small block applications. I would use good rockers. I don't know about the longevity of Scorpion stuff. Maybe it's good. We've never had problems with the comp stuff. I have a stock L96 with 2.3 liter Whipple. How far can I push it? You should put ring gap in it. You should make sure that you have a good intercooler. You should run E85, so put lots of injector and pump in it. And then you could, is an L96 or an L86? Those are both motors, but they're different ones. I do cars has done a 4v Ford teardown, and y'all go watch it. I've tore down lots of 4v motors, Ford specifically. You were trying to, I was trying to ask about TI, VCT, and what gains from adjusting a double cam versus pairs would be. Didn't go through. So you want to know how variable cam works with two cams as opposed to just one? Well, it gives you more tuning ability, right? And that's the other thing about variable cam that a lot of people don't realize is that, and we talk about this a lot when we're looking at it from very simplistic nature. Like if we talk about adjusting a cam on an LS, well, if I advance the cam, I'll pick up a bunch of low speed power. Maybe yes and maybe no. Maybe it already has that. Maybe the cam profile that you put in is already really close to being optimum for low speed power production, as good as it's going to get. Maybe it's the best compromise between top end and bottom end. Maybe it's skewed to the top end and you will pick up power. You just don't know. The problem is that these universal things that we state that like, yeah, oh yeah, long runners are better for the bottom end and short runners are better for the top end. But when you say that, people don't know what you mean by bottom and top. Like, where is that crossover point? Like a long runner fast manifold is better than a short runner manifold through 95% of the curve. So it's not just better down low, it's better. Unless you were just looking at peak power, and sometimes it's better there too. And same thing with variable cam timing. If we want to advance the cam, when we tell people, yeah, you advance the cam, more low speed power, retard the cam, more top end power, but it doesn't always work like that. That's not a universal thing for all cams. It depends on the cam that you pick. Sometimes on stock cams that works. Sometimes on aftermarket cams it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you don't get what you get. A good example of that was when I tried to advance the cam and thought I was going to be a hero. We advanced the LS9 cam to pick up all that lost bottom end because we know that that thing is really soft. And I wanted to pick up the bottom end, even if it cost me some of the top. The only thing that it did is cost me power. It didn't add anything. Yeah, your L96 is good. It's like any other LS. It could make lots of power. You need ring gap in it. We normally, on a boosted application, we normally put head studs in it, and you put new gaskets in it while you're doing that. A cam and springs and boost, and then E85 is always good. You can make everything that blower has to offer with that motor. Richard, would you personally put an Airflow Research 245 head on a 7,200 RPM LS2 402? That head would make a lot of power on that combination. I honestly think that the valves are bigger than I want. The intake valve is bigger than I want. It's more like a rec port version. When we did it, it made good power. 243, 251 cam, 12-to-1 compression. I don't know about. Take a look at the head test that I did. I thought that the mast heads maybe made a little bit more power. And that head test, remember, is, I don't know, 2010 or something like that. There's a lot of better stuff that's come out, or different stuff at the very least, that's come out since then that may make even more power, Frankenstein heads or those kinds of things. Maybe those are better. Maybe the newer versions of the things that I tested back then now are even better. That was a while ago. How much power do you think a 496 9-to-1 iron heads, solid roller, single pattern solid roller, and a 1050 is going to make? I don't know. Probably less than 600, 550 or something, 570, something like that. The 2-liter Ecotech moves the cams 10 degrees on both sides of straight up. A lot of the cams from OEMs have as much as 30, 40, or 50 degrees of potential movement. They don't swing them at wide open throttle when they're doing that. Usually that's 10 degrees or less at wide open throttle is the only variation when they're doing that. When they swing it a lot is when they're doing drivability and cruise and stuff. To me, the twin independent part of variable cam timing is like putting boots over your shoes so your feet don't step in a puddle. That's overkill. It's not overkill. If you can optimize both cams independently, you will make more power. Adjusting them the same, very rarely does a twin cam engine want the same advance and retard on the intake and the exhaust cam. But again, like I said, it depends on where the cams are and how they're ground. Yeah, Admiral, that's the other thing is you're adjusting the lobe separation angle too if you can adjust them independently. Might as well figure out a way to make cams act like free valves and adjust one cylinder at a time and make them be infinitely adjustable for any kind of cam timing you could possibly think of. Do you have a go-to aftermarket 4-bolt head? I don't know. Are you talking about a Ford or a Chevy or a Dodge, or what's your question? Got to be more specific than that. Yeah, Noodles, I agree. A VVT is like having fully adjustable suspension. If you know what you're doing, the results can be great. If you don't, you can tune yourself right out of a good suspension or right out of all of the power. Because I remember watching the tuning done on the Coyote stuff from the guys at Kenny Bell, and they worked for a really long time after they put boost to that Coyote and found lots of ways to lose power by moving the camshafts, and eventually got to the point where it made the most power or whatever. And the interesting thing is they didn't make the most power, obviously, at the most boost. And they didn't make the most power at the least boost either, which was really odd because I thought that those two things would definitely go together. But it was a big learning curve. An LS 4-bolt. So you want what? Well, just tell me. It'd be better. That's too general of a question. What is your combination, and what are you trying to get done, and what kind of power are you trying to make? Any idea what parts I could use to build an era correct factory test mule on a 56 283? Are you building a power pack one? Are you building a fuelie? No, it wouldn't have been a fuelie until 57, right? The guys at Westech have a fuelie 283 that they're putting together. So is it a dual quad one? What is it? How reliable is the VS 7875? I still have mine. It still runs, so I get nothing but good things to say about it. Can the boosted stock LS and Coyote run with a boosted Hemi? Yeah, I can. Brian, I 100% agree with that. Evening stock daily guy. The LT should have stuck with gaskets like the LS instead of siliconing everything. I do not. I'm not a fan of that. That's one thing I really like about the LS is the like almost infinite reusability of all of their gaskets. The front cover gasket, the rear cover gasket, the valley gasket, the oil pan gasket. As long as you don't damage it pulling it off. And a lot of guys reuse head gaskets. I reuse new ones, but I don't normally reuse the used ones. I would in a pinch because you just put it back on there, and as long as all the sealing that pulled off of it, because when you pull a motor that has 200,000 or 300,000 miles off, you pull the head off, the gasket's going to be in some sort of state of disarray. At the very least, part of the steel cores are going to want to come with the head, and part of them are going to want to stay with the block. And also, when you finally get them separated, you'll peel off the imprinted part of it that helps with the water sealing. And so that can be problematic. But like I said, if I had to, I would just put it back on and I would run it. I just wouldn't do that for something I was going to put in a car. You should be able to find 283 stuff. Do you ever see Chevy working up a big block of variable cam timing, like a Gen 8 or something like that? I don't. Does the I don't think that the Gen 7 big block I don't think has variable cam timing, does it? I can't remember now. On the 8.1. Richard, is it recommended to stroke a 6.2 L92 to 416 and keep the VVT and use the car intake? My power goals are 675 and 650. You won't do that with a stock cam. You won't make that much power. You won't make anywhere near that much power with a stock cam. You need a big camshaft in it, and usually when you do that to make that kind of power, you're going to have to give up VVT. I don't know if they have VVT cams that are bigger than stock. I just don't know how much power they'll make. I don't know if they'll get you to that sort of power level. I don't think that they will. You have to copper spray them to replace the head gaskets. I've done that. Richard, I think you meant to say Gen 3 Hemi instead of LT. So will the Gen 3 Hemi replace the LS motor for swapping? Four-bolt head for boosted 427, sleeved 6-liter, 1,800 horsepower. I've always wanted to do the 468 sleeve motor. You did, although it was NA. I don't know that I would do 1,800 horsepower even on a sleeve block with just a 4-bolt head. I think I would want to do a 6-bolt on that application. I don't know. You might be able to make runs like that or passes like that maybe, but I don't know that it would. I think you need more than that for 1,800 horsepower. If I was going to pick one, a masthead is really good and it flows a lot. But the 1,800 horsepower is not making that power is not going to be hard. Whatever you put on there, you put an airflow research head or a mast head or something good like that, and you have the internal fortitude for that. Then it's just having enough camshaft and enough RPM, and then big enough turbos, and then 1,800 horsepower is not a big deal. If you start with 600, let's say, or 650 or 700 with a 427, which is certainly possible, 1,800, you start multiplying that out. That doesn't even take a lot of boost to get there. So you can make that. The thing is, at what point you could start getting to where the limit of the, even if you use the CA625 head studs, I think a 6-bolt that's probably 6-bolt territory. Gen 7 no VVT? I didn't think so. Dan, I know that the silicone lasts a long time. It's just so much easier to put the gasket on and put the part on. It's like a lot less cleanup and prep and stuff. So you like the LT5 in your 9501. That's an OG LT5. Casey had a DFX5 for cutting copper head gaskets for small blocks. That was another way that I'm sure people still do that. Diego, what kind of heads and cam do I need to make 400 horsepower on a Gen 3 LQ4? You don't 400 wheel horsepower. You don't really need to change the heads. You could do that with a camshaft. You could do that with the Comp 469 camshaft. If you're going to put heads on it, if you're going to go with a cathedral port head, put a 799 or a 243. If you want a stock head, you would make even more power if you put a rec port like an LS3 or an LY6 head on there, or almost any aftermarket cathedral port head like an Airflow Research or a Trick Flow or a Dart or Texas Speed or an ASCAS 220. Any of those are really good. An F1X Pro Charger is too big for a 5.3 combo. Again, it depends on how fast you're spinning it and how much power you want to make. It's not the combination I put together for a street motor. Richard, would you do a Scat Cat Dyno 392 long block and Hellcat supercharger with all factory catalog upgrades? There's no way I could gather that stuff together. They wouldn't provide that for testing. Richard, I'm building a Gen 3 6-liter LS Diamond Pistons, Ls Rods, 9.4 to 9.5 to 1, 243, 251 cam, LS1 intake? That's not the way I would go. DNA GT44 with no plan to go with the GT55. What power should I make at 4,900 foot elevation? Well, the GT45 is only going to allow you to make like 700 or 750 at the flywheel. So all of the rest of the stuff is going to be a problem. And with the GT45 on a 6-liter, you're going to have back pressure with that. I would pick a bigger turbo than that on that combination. And I would pick a different intake too. .243 heads, yeah, that's fine. None of that really matters with the turbo that you pick. The turbo is going to dictate how much power you make. Richard, what specific head and cam combination do you recommend for an L92 stroker? I don't know what you're trying to do. I think we went over that. I went over a bunch of heads and stuff for you. And I have videos up of 416 stroker combinations. Take a look at to get an idea, take a look at the LS3 carbureted intake video, and we ran all of those on a 416. You can kind of see what's going on there. Is a Hellcat 6.2 and a Gen 3.4 Viper considered heresy? No, if you could set it back, the thing would handle even better, right? .6 liter LT8 is a good motor. How many engines do you own? I don't know. It's a few. Picked up a 2019 350 GTR Shelby shell for 4,000. Can't help but think a 6-liter for all this. Yeah, it would be good. An aluminum one would be even better, like an aluminum 6-liter or an aluminum 6.2 or even aluminum 5.3. Jonathan, there's already a lot of Gen 3 Hemis out there. I see quite a few of those in wrecking yards, and those are good motors. A lot of them are blown up. Is part of the problem. That car's a 98 Camaro. What intake can I use without cutting? The Fast, I think, fits. The LS6, the Dorman versions of the LS2 and the LS6 fit. Richard, would be cool to see the header primary length, unequal length tested from David Bizar's recent video. Is he? I haven't watched that yet. Is he teaming the primary length based on the intake runner length of a single plane intake or something? Why is he changing the primary length? Have a turbo 5.3. How much will just changing the intake manifold shift the power band, going from a stock 3-bolt to a high ramp? that is going to shift it. Take a look at the intake test that I did, going from a. You can take a look at the stock. Look at the Cathedral Port intake test that I did. We did that on a 6-liter, but even on a 5.3, if you change from a truck manifold or a Trailblazer SS to a high ram, it's going to change where you make peak power by a pretty good bit. Some of that is going to be on a stock cam. It's not going to change as much as the change will be if you run those same 2 manifolds and test them with a bigger camshaft. Elias, if you want a budget cam for those, the Sloppy Stage 2 is, I think, the lowest price one. What would be needed to make an LA3 fuel system capable of 500 to 600? I don't know. Does anybody know how much power you can make? Are you talking about NA or boosted with that? Because it's going to be there's going to be a difference. Is a single pattern cam not a good choice for an NA big block? You'll make more power with a dual pattern. Somebody hit the like button. How's our poll doing? Wow, we're still split like almost 50-50. Will the LT motor eventually replace the LS motor for swapping? 47% are saying yes. 53% saying no. Honestly, I expected way more no's on this, but it's all good. Make sure you hit the like button. We've got 187 people watching and only 99 likes. Come on. 289 versus L99. The 4.3 liter. I think a 289 is going to make more torque. Delta cam regrinds are price fair and you get the grind you need. Are you also going to need to change the push rod length, or are they small base circle cams? Max effort cam for an LS2 with a fast 102 intake and log tubes 243. Do you still have the stock bottom end on that? Because that's going to limit how much camshaft you can put in it. If you have a stock bottom end, meaning no valve reliefs in the pistons, then you're looking at something that's going to be a low 230 at 50 on the intake camshaft. And it's not going to be able to have a really tight LSA, which would help everything. You need more piston to valve clearance to make maximum power. But it's going to be something like a 231, 232 on the intake and 248 on the exhaust and 112 or something on the LSA. So take a look at, I have lots of 6-liter cam tests up there with cams like that. You can kind of see. GT500 would be tricked with a Shelby aluminum Ford Scion. That would be kind of cool. Do you think a 289 would like E7s or AFRs more? I think AFR, the 165 is probably by 100 horsepower. Brian, explain the five the stroke theory. I don't. Are you talking about the 5-stroke theory? We'll make that for another video. It's going to take a little while. What is your preferred NA/LS compression ratio for power and drivability? I don't have that exact thing. Whenever I run these motors, I run them usually at whatever the factory was, whatever the motor came out of the junkyard with is fine. If you put more compression in, it's going to make more power, but then there's always a balance between static compression, dynamic compression, piston to head clearance, quench, timing, octane, detonation, all of that stuff. Lots of the LS stuff, especially aluminum headed LS stuff, you can run a fair bit of compression. You can run 11-to-1, especially as you put more camshaft in it. You can run that on street motors. Overbuilt, you hit the thumbs up button, you get a gold star. Yes. 3 gold stars. The advisor was stating that the length changes were to attempt to more equally space the pulses so that they arrive at the collector closer to 180-degree separation on a single bank. So he's trying to adjust the pulse arrival time by changing length based on the firing order. I'm surprised Dan hasn't chimed in on that. I'm putting an LS2 out of a Trailblazer SS for low boost, single 76 millimeter, stock bottom end, 228. Texas Speed Cam, OEM or forged pistons for 12 pounds. You can run factory pistons at 12 pounds. That's going to make a lot of power at 12 pounds. Why do you want 12 pounds on pump gas? I don't understand how people know that already. Oh, I got to run 12 pounds. Well, you don't even know what power that is. What if it's 1,200 horsepower? 12 pounds is. What if it's only 300? But you can, if you're running on pump gas, make sure that you're going to have to be just spot on your timing and stuff if you're running 91 or 93. But I would put ring gap in it. 289 Studebaker V8 for the other guy's engine. Isn't the 280? I thought that the 289 Studebaker was a Ford motor. Is it not a Ford? Gen 4 aluminum 5.3 block, nice. Gen 3 4.8 crank. Gen 4 4.8 rods. So you have an aluminum 4.8 basically. 706s with a 2-inch intake, stock exhaust valve, Canos and Elgin, 1839 truck intake. So that you have is the 1839 sloppy stage 1? I don't know what the Elgin designations are, sloppy stage 1 versus sloppy stage 2. But either way, that will work. If it's a sloppy stage 2 in a 4.8, I think that's too much cam, unless you want the cammy kind of sound and you want it to be a little softer down low. All of that stuff will work good. If you're running boost on it, I would run a stage 1 cam as opposed to a stage 2 cam. But that combination will work. How long do you think a 4.8 liter LS would last if it has twin turbos and only driven on the street? I think it'll last a really long time as long as the tune is right and you don't detonate it. What ring gap do you run for 1,000 flywheel? I don't base the ring gap on power. I base it on safety and how long you're going to be at boost. Like I would run lots of ring gap for 7 pounds, which might be 500 flywheel or 500 wheel horsepower. We normally put 7 to 7.5 thousandths. For a street car, I would put 7 thousandths ring gap per inch of bore. So a Studebaker 289 is a Studebaker motor. It's not a Ford. Okay. I have a 68 Impala Custom fastback donks. Nice. I like it. Do you think a 5.3 is enough to motivate it? It is with boost. You know about the blowdown phase for exhaust for 100 years. The two parts of the exhaust stroke are when the exhaust valve opens, allowing the pressure to vent while the piston is still at bottom dead center. What ring gap do you like to run for 1,000? Oh, we did that. What's happening? Stage 1, yes. Do you know if a dual quad oval air cleaner can hide a direct injection nitrous system? I think you can. I'm looking at Nitrous Express crossbar plates, and they're $400 each. That should fit. Can you put it under the intake? Stage 2 is 1840. So that's a stage 1, 1839, right? Okay. That's a better choice for a 4.8. I like the smaller camshafts on the 4.8s. Yes, it's on 4.8 liter horsepower and torque, and yes, it's a stage 1. So a 4.8 with a, what are the specs on that camshaft? If you tell me the specs, I can give you a pretty good idea what kind of power it's going to make. And you don't have to stop. I mean, it's pretty much appreciated, but you don't have to put money in there. I'll answer your question. So it's a 4.8. I'm hoping it's a flat top piston, ported 706s. Is there any plug and play self-tuning ECM for a Gen 5 Camaro? Not that I know of. What is the cubic inch limit for 706 heads? There's no cubic inch limit. We'll see that when I'm doing a test or a video that I'm editing right now about running stock heads on a bunch of different size motors and showing what it does. And we keep increasing the specific power output relative to the airflow when we go up in displacement. But you know what the head flow limit is on a 706 head. We know what they flow. They're like 235 or 240 or something like that. So that we know that they'll support 480 or somewhere near 500 horsepower. So it's not a cubic inch limit. There's a big pressure spike where the exhaust valve opens, then a depression, then a softer spike, and the piston starts pushing the exhaust out. Dan, that's one thing I wish I had more of. I wish I had more in-cylinder pressure data. That would be cool. So I could show people what's happening, during all of these events. I've seen some of it, and I've seen some NA stuff, and I've seen some boosted stuff, and it's really, really cool, and I would like to be able to go over it. Still want to do a Truck 6.4 Hemi. Those are good motors. Would you be able to do a BGE Hemi? I don't know what that is. 2016 and newer. Party heads can flow upwards of 390 cm. I don't have any. I only had that one 5.7 Hemi that the guys from Motor Trend have, and they let me use the data on that. Yeah, somebody's asking about forged pistons. The Summit Pro LS stuff is good. JE makes good stuff. Wiseco makes good stuff. Scat, those guys are all do good stuff. And considering what we do with stock stuff, any sort of forged piston you put in there is going to be really good. How much power have we run through the L33 so far? Not a lot. 600 or 700 horsepower, I think, is as much as we've run so far. Kurt, the 2016 to 22 Kawasaki H2R Hybrid bike has a 1,999 cc supercharged engine with 310 crank horsepower, and it goes 250 miles an hour. That's a lot. I'll have to look into that. Any benefit to L92 truck heads on LS2 bottom end? Yes, the like we said, the most powerful factory head that you can put on your 6-liter is a factory rec port head. An LS3, an LY6, L99, L92, not an L99. Yeah, an L99, L92. All of those factory rec ports will make more power than any of the factory cathedral port heads. So from a stock standpoint, that's the most powerful. Those are the most powerful head. Then when you go to aftermarket stuff, then there's a different thing going. How about an LT5 engine? Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. Westech has one of those I'd like to run. I have to ditch my Victor Junior heads. Should I get a set of Trickflow 225 Cleaver heads or AFR 220 heads? Basically a super hot 347 comp cam. You can't go wrong with any of those. You could also put the CHI 3V stuff on there if you're thinking about going Cleaver. I remember when 600 horsepower was a massive amount of power. It really still is. I mean, 600 horsepower in a car while you're driving it is a lot. Richard, I have a Gen 4 aluminum 5.3 block, but use the Gen 3 24X 4.8 crank, Gen 4 4.8 rods, Summit Pro Ls Pistons. I have 706 heads with 2-inch valves and stock exhaust valves. Okay, so did you rebalance all of that stuff? Will I benefit from 706 heads on a 6.2, a stage 2 cam? You're going from a, are you going from a factory rec port down to a 6.2? Because that would be a step in the wrong direction. You'll make a lot less power that way. Scott, I would be the wrong guy to ask about resonators. I just put a Boral on my truck and get a little bit of drone. Do you believe a resonator could cure this? Maybe. When you camel these engines, do you ever have an issue with getting them to idle nice? I don't do a lot of idle quality tests on the engine dyno. We don't have all the accessories and all that stuff, and it's not in the car. What I can say is on bigger cams, that's gonna be an issue. You have to raise the idle RPM to do that, and then you're gonna have to have a guy that knows how to play with the idle tune and transition stuff, because that becomes a problem. And then if you go up even further in making the camshaft wilder, you're gonna have to start looking at converter also. Eric, so he shared the length and changes were determined and calculated using TFX pressure transducers in the intake, combustion chamber, and exhaust. He shared the results, but not the pressure recordings. Okay. That would be cool if you had that data, if you could adjust it and it could tell you what's working and not working. That's kind of the way that we use the dyno. And if it turns out that that's the best combination, then that's the best combination. What vehicle will you think the LT is in and would most likely provide cores in the near future? The L83 in the trucks is going to be in the 1500 trucks is going to be the most popular or the most prevalent. Is there an adapter plate for fast 102 cathedral to square port? You don't need to do that. There are adapters they have adapters going either way. You can go from rec port to cathedral or from cathedral to rec port. I don't recommend them because they both hurt power. I just recommend putting the right intake manifold on there. If you're going to run rec port heads on your, I think you were talking about the 6-liter. If you're going to run rec port heads on your 6-liter, I would just put a stock LS3 intake manifold on there. I wouldn't put the fast on there. How much have you dealt with on DoD deletes? Is it the first thing you do in your junkyard engines you find? If it has DoD, we will delete it. Most of the stuff that I get, like an LR4 or an LM7, doesn't have DoD, so we don't have to worry about it. I don't think I've run Kazi P51 heads, or I have used the P51, but not the SR71. I've run one of them and not the other. Should I run a 2-bar sensor on a 305 at 8 psi? You don't really need that, since a 1-bar will take you to 14.7. If you're not going beyond that, then I wouldn't worry about it. And I say that having run a 3-bar sensor and then top that 3-bar sensor out because we didn't think we were going to go that high, but we eventually did. I have a set of Gen 3.5 LS rods and pistons. I was wondering if you know how they hold up compared to the floating wrist pin. What is the 3.5 then if it's not a floating pin? Gen 357 Hemi head flows 284. I didn't think that they were that high. At a 1/2-inch lift in the Gen 457 head flows 335. I didn't think an early 5.7 head flowed 284. Do you plan on building a car engine for yourself someday? Yeah, I have a Dodge Omni Turbo in the garage. And I have a 240Z, and I have a 5-liter Mustang. Would you ever try an open track day in the Nova? I don't own the Nova anymore, so it's not mine. So you'd have to ask Oliver about that. Have you heard about an 850 horsepower Silverado that's supposed to come out? I haven't heard about that. It's Gen 4 rods with press pistons. Okay. Well, if it's a Gen 4 rod, then and it has that rod strength, then you're better off with that, right? World Rally style Omni. It would be really cool. I would love for that car to be all-wheel drive with a K-swap in it. Is Oliver pulling out the 60 and swapping in something else? I don't know. He hasn't told me about that. Wanting to run a 5.3 aluminum block with 4.8 internals. Why wouldn't you just run the 5.3 stuff? I need help. I've swapped a Ford modular 4.6 valve Cobra motor in a 99 GT and blocked the return because the GT has no return and I cannot get it to run good. Well, have you checked your fuel pressure to see what that is? Are you ever going to do a series with how to get the most horsepower with the least amount of fuel? So you want a really, really low brake specific fuel consumption number? What would the advantage of that be, other than if we were racing at Le Mans or somewhere where fuel mileage at wide open throttle was a concern? What's the average price for an LT swap? I don't know. It's got to be a lot. Read about stock 5.3s easily doing 900 horsepower, just rods and pistons. I believe the LH4 aluminum Gen 3 5.3 has Siamese bores, making it stronger. It's well, if you're watching this channel, you should know that a 5.3 with a stock bottom end with just ring gap did 1,300, and stock 6 liters. And the 5.3 would easily do this too. We just didn't do it back then. Stock 6 liters, stock crank, rods, piston, block will do 1,500. So you don't need you don't need Ford rods and Ford pistons. You can do that with just stock stuff. With Ford stuff, you can go even more. You can get to the limit of the block if you put Ford rods and pistons in it. And I don't know where that limit is, but and I don't know how many times I would do 1,550 horsepower with a stock bottom end, but we did it and the motor's still alive. Which boosted LS would you pick to beat a boosted Red Eye Hellcat? How much power does that thing make? I mean, isn't it only like, it's less than 1,000 horsepower, right? It'd be pretty easy to do that with lots of LS motors. That would be a more a function of your drivetrain and getting that thing to hook. Making the power would be easy. LS3 heads and intake versus 862 heads and fast on a SS2 6 liter. An LS3 will make lots more power than an 862 head, unless the 862 head is like extensively ported. I have that video up already if you want to take a look at it. I have a 706, which is the same as the 862 versus an LS3 head. What is the life cycle of a dyno motor versus daily driver versus race and marine applications? They have dyno motors. Like Westech has dyno motors. The Gladiator and the Gladiator 2 are dyno motors that have thousands and thousands of runs on them, and the motor still repeats. So they last a long time. They'll take a lot of abuse, and they're decade or decades old also. Yeah, 5.3 has gone over 1,000 horsepower. 5.3 has gone over 1,300 horsepower with a stock bottom end on this channel. Come on, get your numbers right. 1,000 horsepower. It's like so 5 minutes ago. We have a complete LT subframe, engine, trans, and suspension at my local yard for $27,000. Can you buy a whole truck for that? Any upgrades for a set of 823 square ports? Have a set that drop exhaust valve? Well, you can port them. You can put different valves in them. You can mill them. Only 1,000 horsepower. I know. Oh, so they're 800. Yeah, that's what I thought that they were like 800 horsepower. 800 horsepower is really, really easy to make on the boosted LS. You think the Clevite P bearings can handle 1,000 race miles? I don't think that if you have everything else right, I don't think that the bearing is going to wear out. If you look at a factory bearing, it's again 200,000 or 300,000 miles on it. A 3,000 mile race should be no problem at all. What's your process for braking in a newly machined engine? If we put a brand new engine on the engine dyno, it has computer controlled break-in cycles, and we normally run it through twice. We can adjust the load RPM, the amount of load, how long it stays at each of those RPMs, how many cycles we can adjust all of that. But and then once you set all that up, you just push the button and it just sweeps through all that. It does all that for you. And we usually do a couple of those normally. Does anybody know what 8-speed transmissions, how much power they'll take? So 5 minutes ago, yeah, 2,000 is the new 1,000. I haven't run anything where I've seen 2,000 on the dyno. Rich, have you ever lost a flat tab camshaft? We have. I would recommend I usually go overkill when we do back when we were doing lots of flat tapping stuff, because that's when they were going bad way back when, and now I think that they're doing it again. I don't know if it's a lifter problem. We run a break-in oil. We put like high zinc additive in it. I coat the bottoms of the lifters with assembly lube. I coat the cam lobes all with assembly lube. And we put them on with soft springs and break it in, do the break-in cycle. And then we prime the oiling system before we start, especially if it's a new motor. We prime the oiling system in and do that, and then try to run it. Okay, guys, let's see. Our poll is, will the LT motor eventually replace the LS motor for swapping? 48% saying yes and 52% saying no. We will end our poll right there. Preheat the oil. Yeah, that's another thing you can do. Yeah, losing lobes on the cam is never fun, because then it's you got metal flake oil after that. Okay, guys, time to get going. Thank you guys all for showing up. Glitter bomb your oil. No, I know it's not. It's it's terrible. You look at it, you're like, oh, it's so pretty. Oh, that's right. That's all that metal stuff. My oil shouldn't look like that. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'm working on another video now. Hopefully you guys have all taken a look at the last video I put up. Thank you guys for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow. Boom. And we're ending.